Hello my dolly dearies and welcome to another video. Now today we are of course feeling especially spooky, as it is of course Halloween and the spooky month. I am so excited to make this doll. Now that I'm back with doll customizing, I thought I want to do something big, and I really enjoyed our crazy body modification doll from last year, so I thought this year I want to do something again with loads of body modifications and quite scary. So what better route is there than a gigantic spider? I mean, what else is there, of course. So this year that's what I'm going to be trying to make. It's going to be a challenge, and I've never really made any creature like this before, so it'll certainly be an interesting one to see how it turns out. But I'm so excited to get started with this project. So, without any further ado, let's get on with the video. For our base doll, we will be using this Clawdeen. While not visible on camera, she was pretty dusty, beaten up and scratched up, so she is the perfect doll to be using for our full restoration project. I've got a brief sketch of what I want to do, but I'm not going to be sticking too close to it as I'm not 100% sure what is possible to do. But to begin, we can remove her head and begin scraping out all of the hair plugs. And with her nice and bold, we can remove those little ears of hers. Seeing how she's going to be a gigantic spider, I don't think she's going to need her wolf ears too much. So, off with them. With her ears gone and out of the way, we can remove all of her face paint with acetone. I dip my cotton buds in a small little dish of acetone and use a sweeping motion to take all the factory paint off of the face, very carefully making sure to not smear it across her face because that would create more work for myself. And with all of her face paint gone, we can start on the body modifications. We are going to have to completely get rid of the bottom half of her body. So I take a small handsaw and violently hack at her to saw it away. We won't actually be needing any of those bits, and we're going to be constructing the spider bit from scratch. To begin, I take our hands and stick some pins in them so that we can give her some nice long talons as well. Be very careful with this because I did really badly stab my finger. And now we can move on to making the armature for her spider body. I roughly measure out with the wire what kind of shape and size I want it to be before cutting it to size, and then make this kind of skeletal frame out of the wire. Next, I make small legs out of straight bits of wire which I will later cover in fabric. I measure each piece to be the same length and thread it through the middle armature and kind of link it all together. And with a lot of hot glue and extra wire securing it all in place, we've got a nice looking armature. And I also want her face to have this kind of open mouth jaw thing, so I quickly take my knife to slice her open so that we can kind of pin it all open with wires and clay and make her look extra scary. And with all of the armatures hot glued and put into place with extra wire and silly amounts of material, we can begin on making it look more like a spider. To begin, I make a pattern out of fabric. To do this, I cover all of the spider bits in cling film before covering it in masking tape so that I can make a pattern out of that for what I need to cover this. I only make one side as it is symmetrical, and I cut this out twice of this nice crushed velvet black fabric, which kind of gives the silky sheen that you see on tarantulas. I sew this all together, careful to make sure I had the dart in place to make sure it sits nice and flush against the armature. Then I use a ladder stitch to join the last bit together, making sure that it is nice and snug over the wires. I then stuff the entire thing with packing peanuts as I am not 100% sure where all of my yarn stuffing went, but this works just as well. And that is already looking quite nice if I do say so myself. Now it is time for the legs. I cut out a bunch of strips of the same crushed velvet fabric and measure them to be just over the length of the legs. I cover each leg in a bit of glue so that I can stick the fabric on so it'll stay and hold a bit better. And with a little bit of effort and fiddling, I managed to cover the legs in this. And with it secured in place, I can lattice stitch it all together so that all of the wire is covered up and we don't have any messy glue bits sticking out. And with all the legs covered and no wire showing, that is looking a lot more spider-like than before. Now it's on to the clay. The clay is what is really going to bring all of the spooky bits together. I take equal parts A and B of my 2-part epoxy sculpt and mush them together thoroughly. And with it all mushed together, I lengthen her neck a lot. I add little points which look almost like fangs to the end of all of her spidery bits. And I also start to pin open her mouth. I later also added some claws to her hand because I forgot to sculpt those on my initial pass. And on a second pass, I continue refining these shapes to get them looking a lot nicer, and I also added tongue and fangs to her face. As another touch, I decide that it'd also be good to give her a little bit of modesty, and using some puffy paint, I give her a spiderweb bra. And with that all done, it's time to paint her. I sand all the clay pieces down beforehand and begin coating her in lots of thin layers of a dark red colour, which I really feel is going to make her look extra creepy and spooky. And with about 4 or 5 thin layers of paint done, I can go in and seal it with my acrylic varnish. It does turn out quite glossy, so we do have to coat everything in a couple coats of Mr. Super Clear. And now we can move on to the hair. I had this stuff left over from some wigs in a mix of short and long strands, which when put on her looked super duper creepy. I did initially think that I'd cut the long bits, but it kinda looks cool, so I decided to keep it. And we can shove her into the hair burrito and give her another coat of Mr. Super Clear to begin our face up. To begin, I go in with some dark pastels to add even more depth to her face, making it look extra dark and spooky and her mouth look absolutely enormous on her face. I can also begin taking some pastels to blush in her eye crease and nose to give more depth and more dimension to her face. With a black pencil, I can also begin to sketch in all of her extra eyes. As she is a spider, she does of course need the signature 8 eyes to go with the 8 legs. I sketch in 2 sets of eyes above her pre-sculpted eyes and 1 set below to try and space them out nicely on her face. Alas, pastels and pencils weren't taking too well to her face, as they often don't in winter, so I had to go straight in with my gouache paints. These built up a beautiful thick layer of colour which it was really easy to paint on top of and get so many thin pretty layers. I highly recommend gouache paint to all of those who don't have it already. And I continue going in with pastels now that I've got a more defined eye shape to add some more eyeshadow and shading to the rest of her eyes. I then lighten what would be the whites of her eyes to a grey, which makes it stand out a bit from the black lining it. I go back and forth making sure that everything is the right shape before I start adding in her red eyes. While in retrospect I think these would have been cool in a more yellow or orange, I do think the red goes really quite nicely and adds a kind of duotone effect to her being only red and black. Now, her eyeliner wasn't showing up great, so I decided to break out the black 3.0 paint, because that thing shows up so dark and works so perfectly to really make her eyes pop. It was a bit more difficult to paint with and turned out a bit lumpy and splotchy in some places, but the effect it gave for the rest of it was so good. I also brightened up her eyes with a bit of orange to make them pop, and make sure to smooth this out in a nice gradient so it looks almost like they're glowing. I then also paint her fangs white. This will really help them stand out on her face and make them look more like actual teeth rather than fleshy appendages. I also brighten up her tongue to make it a bit more flesh-like. For a final step, I dot in some tiny highlights into her eyes. And then, for a final step, I add some Warhammer shade onto her teeth to make them look extra grimy. The pristine white teeth were just kind of not quite right, so adding this kind of muddy wash made them look a lot more realistic and grisly, I think. With everything dry and sealed in with a coat of Mr. Super Clear, we can add some Liquitex High Gloss Varnish to her eyes and tongue. And with that all dry, we can remove her from the hair burrito. Then our final thing to do is attach the head to the body. Make sure to heat up the head so that you don't crack any of your nice epoxy things. But with the head reattached, she is all done! Despite how much I absolutely enjoyed making this doll to the absolute max, and I loved how all of her body modifications turned out, I'm still not 100% happy with her. I feel that I could have done something else, made her a bit different, maybe a different color on the skin, maybe some more spider stuff, maybe she needed a crown. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm not 100% happy with her. What do you guys think of her? Please let me know in the comment section below. I'd love to hear what your guys' thoughts would be on how I could make her a bit better or seem a bit spookier. Something about her just doesn't quite sit right with me. Maybe I'm just overthinking it, maybe she is absolutely amazing, but I really enjoyed making her nonetheless. And I hope that you guys all really enjoyed the process of seeing how she was made. I'm really excited to do more dolls with gigantic body mods, and I need an excuse to do more of them in the future. I'm so happy to be back, and especially for Halloween. Thank you guys all so much for watching, and please like, comment, share and subscribe, and I shall see you all in the next one. Bye!